Hello, and welcome to the third session on How to Travel in 2021 event series. And this evening we're going to be looking at city breaks. As many of you joining us for the second or even third time will know, I'm Claire Irvin. I'm Head of Travel at the Telegraph. And in the next 45 minutes, we'll be covering the latest COVID-19 travel restrictions and looking ahead to the future of what you can expect while travelling, and specifically tonight looking at city breaks, both home and away. First of my Telegraph colleagues to join me this evening is Ben Ross, Deputy Head of Travel. He should be appearing somewhere on your screen any moment. And yeah, there he is. Hi, Ben. And also joining us is Chief Consumer and Culture Editor, Nick Trend. And there's Nick. So, I mean, we had high hopes for tonight in terms of timing, and it really, this week, I think, you know, I speak for all of us in saying it's brought a huge flood of relief to all of us involved in travel and to, you know, to everybody else who's frustrated by lockdown and desperate for something to book and to look forward to. So, you know, finally, the dream of drifting down the Grand Canal or exploring the museums of Madrid or the ancient sites of Rome starting to feel a little more concrete once again. Hurrah! And we can start perusing the best lunch spots in Paris, plan a shopping trip to Milan or New York. I mean, you know, hopefully the world is starting to feel like our oyster again. So, I mean, clearly we've got to be a little bit cautious. There is still some doubt over dates. We know that from April the 12th, the shackles will start to come off and we'll be able to stay in self-catering accommodation in the UK, which of course will open up. Many of you will have read online at Telegraph Travel ideas for self-catering in our city centres. Museums, most outdoor attractions and theme parks, pools, pubs, restaurants will be able to serve outdoors from the same date. So things really will, I think, start to feel as though they're beginning to return to normal. And we will be celebrating that in due style across the website Telegraph Travel. We can't, of course, stay in hotels and B&Bs until at least May the 17th. And that's also when we should be able to start thinking about foreign travel practically as well as in our dreams. A little bit later than we hoped. And we do still, as I said, have to be cautious. Dates could shift. And, you know, overseas travel all has to be in agreement with other countries. But, you know, I think hopefully starting tonight, we can start to make some tentative plans and look further into the summer with confidence and to the autumn, I mean, you know, with something approaching certainty. So we, I think a lot of you are interested primarily in overseas city breaks. But as I've mentioned, you know, there will be some wonderful opportunities to visit British cities. London, Edinburgh, Oxford, Cambridge, Bath, York. I mean, you know, there's so many. And in the same way as you might approach overseas cities this year, you'll be treated to the same kind of tourist-free experience in the UK as well. So, you know, in terms of a culture fix, you could do much worse than consider those. We've been advising caution the last few weeks, and you'll have read in Nick's pieces that it's probably worth hanging on for a few more weeks until that key date of April the 12th before you book abroad, when we'll have our next update from the government. Or you could consider booking with some of the tour operators who are BA Holidays, for example, who are really offering unprecedented flexibility in their terms and conditions, allowing you to change flights, hotel bookings, no extra fees. I'm sure, however, you have so many more questions than I've just been able to address there. So I'm going to share the floor now with Ben and Nick and start addressing our pre-submitted questions without further ado. So kicking off, brilliant way to open up. Nick and Ben, what hidden gems would be ideal for a city break over the next 12 months, even if we're still looking at limited restrictions?
Well, It depends. Obviously, it depends very much what you're looking for. But I think, in terms of ease of access and a really wonderful experience when you get there, some of the smaller cities in northern France, places like Le Mans or Angers or Chartres, they're wonderful destinations for a weekend break, just enough to do for a couple of days, and fantastic restaurants. You can get there very easily on the train if that's what you want to do. You could even drive there via one of the channel ports. I actually think these aren't hardly hidden gems, but I think it could be a great time to go to Bruges and Ghent, because they have a big tourist problem normally, but they really won't have this spring, and you see those wonderful medieval cities in a way that you would never otherwise get a chance to. Lesser known in the same region, Antwerp is a great city. I'm a big fan of Antwerp. And then, I think the smaller northern Italian cities, places like Verona and Ravenna, which are often visited just for a day trip while people are touring around, they also make fantastic short break destinations. Bologna too is a wonderful city. Not too many tourists, fantastic food, lots to see, very compact. I'm a big fan of Bologna. I'm sure, Ben, you've got some favourites as well. You're a fan of Seville, aren't you? Whether that's hidden or not.
I wouldn't call Seville little. I mean, one of the things I was going to mention about Bruges and Ghent, I mean, another great reason to go is that Eurostar still offer, I think, the ability to travel onwards from Brussels free. So you can take that as well. You would effectively get a 2-city break there, which would be a fantastic way of visiting those towns. I mean, I wouldn't say they were hidden, but I wonder if in terms of the way we saw lockdown, Copenhagen, Denmark in general, had a very good bit of coverage at the beginning of the pandemic, and it seemed to be dealing with COVID very, very well. And I wonder if it will also come out of lockdown and the pandemic quite well as well. I think in general I would feel quite comfortable about visiting Nordic cities. I sort of slightly feel as though they will, even though obviously Sweden had its own idiosyncratic take on how it was going to deal with lockdown, I slightly feel that they would be the sort of places where I would feel as though I'd get enough personal space to feel relaxed about where I'm going around. You get, if you were to visit Stockholm in the summer, for example, my goodness, I mean, and all the islands are available to you. You can get around and see them. Varsholm is absolutely beautiful. The Vasa Museum, if it was open, would be a tremendous thing to do. It gets that sort of outdoor spirit, and I would apply that to Helsinki, and I would apply that to Copenhagen. Reykjavik was a fantastic early candidate in terms of. I know these might sound a little bit idiosyncratic, but Reykjavik during the pandemic, when we did have travel corridors and things, was a very early adopter of allowing people to visit with proof of a COVID test. I sort of feel these places are going to be quite progressive in how they welcome us when we are able to travel again, and but lots of people would dive straight into the obvious, and I think quite often the food in Copenhagen is extraordinary. The scenery in Helsinki, where you get to look out of the islands, is amazing as well. Maybe try one of those. I'd be pretty keen, and I've travelled extensively in the northern cities, and they are places that I would love to go back to this summer, certainly.
Oslo as well, don't forget Oslo. That's a lovely summer city, with some new museums, very compact, lovely fjord views and everything. I think that's good. And also some of the places like Haarlem and Leiden in Holland as well, worth thinking about too.
I wonder, something else that sort of comes out of this, of course, is that there is a different, as we move back into going on city breaks, we've got the opportunity to explore cities a little bit differently. So we're talking about hidden gems, but remember that the places that are really focused around cruise destinations, for example, Dubrovnik and Barcelona and Venice. These are places that will feel very different this summer because cruising is going to be perhaps a slower recovery. You might get the chance to experience those cities a little bit differently this summer, see them in a different light, see them the way the locals explore them, or see them, just in a quieter light, because there's no way tourism in these places is going to be up to the levels that it was in 2019. So, there are all they don't need to be hidden. This could be a glorious mainstream destination that's suddenly approached in a new light. It could be really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I as you know, had to cancel Venice twice last year. This time last year, and then later in the summer. So that's where I'm hoping to go. But also, I think we should do a little shout out for Switzerland. There's some really beautiful lakeside cities in Switzerland. Lausanne, for example, really gorgeous. Best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Bit of culture, yeah.
And you've got that connectivity as well with the Swiss rail card. You can get around. I mean, obviously we're mostly talking about short breaks, a couple of days in Switzerland, but you can have 3 cities for the price of 1 in Switzerland, and it'd be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Lost more than a couple of days in Switzerland, I can tell you. So if we should really address the elephant in the room, then we're talking about abroad. What do we think about vaccine passports? Lots of questions coming in. And by the way, lots of people in some really beautiful areas of the UK and beyond. So hi to you all. Can't pull out individual names, but yeah, a couple of questions about vaccine passports. If and when they're likely to come in. Will we need COVID tests as well as vaccine certificates? So on. Well, what do we think? I mean, Israel's going great guns, isn't it, in terms of launching their green pass, as I think they call it, which is something they carry on their mobile, and that's to get into gyms and restaurants and so on. What do we think about it allowing us to get into other countries?
Well, it's under review, isn't it? The Prime Minister confirmed yesterday that, or the day before, that they are going to look at it. There are obvious problems with people feeling discriminated against because they can't have a vaccine or whatever. But it's probably a sensible way forward, even if there have to be a few exceptions, and even if it's just an interim measure. And people could perhaps be accepted if they were prepared to take tests as a replacement alternative. But if it enables tourism to restart, travel to restart, things like nightclubs and so forth, then surely it has to be a good thing. It's just a question of getting it right, and not if we look at test and trace, for example, as a system of service which unfortunately doesn't seem to have been got right at all. A lot of money and time and effort's been wasted on that. But this should be a much more straightforward solution, and I think it seems very sensible. We just keep our fingers crossed that they can come up with a good interface, a good app, and it's good that Israel is testing it, because we'll learn from that presumably.
I mean, it's speculation at the moment, obviously, in terms of when that sort of thing might come into play, and whether there'll be a sort of a grey period before then where vaccine passports aren't there, but there is a form of travel corridor between the UK and various destinations. I mean, we've talked about it before, but the idea of needing some sort of security about whether you've had a vaccination or an inoculation in the past is something that lots of travellers have had to grow used to over the years anyway. The yellow fever certificate being a shining example of a period of time where you needed to prove an inoculation before you travelled. Obviously, this is a different process and a different level of concern altogether. But crossing borders is a privilege, and I think I will welcome vaccine passports when they come. I know that there are issues over privacy, and there are issues over whether it will end up being discriminatory in some way. But I'm sure there is a system. We're not foolish that we'll be able to deliver all this. And vaccination is going to be. I mean, I noticed Sean Boyle on our chat is worried about Sweden because it had a high death toll. I mean, I did mention they had a very idiosyncratic time. If we don't have a vaccination process and we can't prove that we can do that, none of these places that we're speculating about, we really are just sort of offering you thoughts, are going to be possible for any of us to travel to. So I think we cross our fingers that some bright spark is going to be able to deliver a really good digital passport for us as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm just picking up. Carol Cuff is asking whether she would think about driving through Europe, and asking whether she thinks cross-country borders in the EU might require any kind of test or passport or other. I think probably they won't. I think the EU will try and keep borders open, but there may be exceptions, if one country has a particularly bad problem with a variant or something. But I think broadly speaking, the EU will try and act as one when it comes to easing.
It's not always been the case thus far. I mean, the Schengen Agreement has been shaken quite often in terms of how they've delivered that. But I suspect there will be this moment when they.
I agree. I mean, there have been inconsistencies, but I think that will be their policy. That will be what they try to do.
And what about the Eurostar? Have we got any insight into? I mean, somebody I noticed earlier had asked about the schedule. There's still only 2 trains between the UK and France at the moment. I mean, that would be for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I think.
What do we have any insight into what's going to happen there?
I think we can expect that. I mean, travel at the moment is not allowed. is that we should expect that there are very few flights leaving the UK and very few trains operating. But again, as we take the baby steps to the next date and the date after, I suspect we'll see companies like Eurostar piggybacking on those announcements and making sure that they are providing schedules that correlate to the desire of us to travel. I'd be astonished if Eurostar were working too hard at that until they know exactly where they are, because I want to be able to put a schedule in that they know they're not going to have to cancel. We really should emphasise that everything we're talking about here, depends on the outline that Boris Johnson gave us on Monday actually coming to pass. The government has put an awful lot of caveats into this, and we in the travel desk are doing our best to make sure that we re-emphasise those caveats as often as possible when we're talking about whether people should be booking and whether operators should be increasing their services. But we're all at the mercy of that until we have more clarity. It's certainly the case that a lot of direct flight operators are increasing their schedules at the moment. They are banking at the moment on a good summer. They are very, very hopeful that what Boris Johnson announced this week will be delivered on.
I think
so on to the airlines. Sorry, Nick.
I was just going to say, I agree with what Ben says. I think Eurostar, they are desperate for cash, and if the market is there, they will ramp up their services very, very quickly. So I think all the great thing about the travel industry is they're very, very quick adapters, and they will schedule more trains, longer trains, and set their prices accordingly to make sure they can get everyone who wants to go. They don't want to be turning down passengers. So I think we're confident they'll be ramped up quite quickly.
And back to the point about airlines. So, as I mentioned as well, that tour operators and airlines are offering very flexible terms and conditions at the moment. Nick, which airlines in particular, if people don't want to travel with a tour operator but want to travel independently, what airlines are most flexible?
Well, the first thing I say is if you do want to travel independently, before the end of the summer, you want to make sure that not just the airline but the accommodation you're booking has a flexible cancellation clause in it, because you don't have nearly as much protection if you book independently as if you book with a tour operator. British Airways is the best example, I would say, is BA, because they're obviously an airline and you can book independently with them. They're offering enormous flexibility on their tickets, allowing you to cancel, I can't remember the exact lead time, but it's within a few days, and then postpone your travel till the end of 2022, I think. But because they've got their holidays on, BA Holidays, if you bind in your hotel booking with that, then you've got total flexibility on the whole package, not just on the flight, and that much more protection. But EasyJet, Ryanair, Jet2, they all have flexible arrangements. It depends what date you're booking for and how happy you would be to, how far ahead you might want to postpone if you had to. But you won't get refunds if you cancel, but you will be able to postpone for most major airlines at the moment.
But also, I found myself in the complicated position of having booked a flight and a car hire with BA last year, and all the package regulations applied for that as well. So it was very useful from my point of view when I was cancelling.
I'm just going to make a point on behalf of somebody that submitted this before we get to a point where we can't fit it in. Really, it's very important. So this reader had asked us to ensure that in all our events, such as this, we give some consideration to specific issues that disabled travellers have compared to the able-bodied. This gentleman's wife is now wheelchair bound. Now, if anybody has got any questions, please do ask us, as I said, in the chat. This is something I think we are as a desk very strong on. We have sections in all our hotel reviews about facilities for lesser abled people. We regularly publish features by writers with different disabilities, and we, particularly Nick, have campaigned over the years for better accessibility in hotels and around attractions and sites. But we're always open to suggestions of how we can do that better. So we're listening. Let us know. So The next question that we had submitted was quite specific, but I think it's something that lots of people are going to be really interested in. So it's city breaks with guided history tours for solo travellers. I mean, we have a huge solo traveller readership. You know, we're often, in fact, we're talking about it today, looking at solo trips. So this reader, her husband sadly died last year, and she'd like to try some short holidays on her own. And I'm sure post-lockdown that's going to apply to lots of people who've spent a lot of the last year on their own. So who'd like to take that, Ben and Nick?
Well, we do a reader survey every year, which is a very useful way of finding out what works from our readers' point of view. And the greatest overlap with everything that's being asked for there feels like Martin Randall, in terms of cultural tours, where you're going to meet other people, you're going to get to see you quite often get insider access, and you get behind the scenes openings. You get to go beyond the ropes off area a little bit and see a little bit more than you might do on your own. But the key thing is that you're also traveling with like-minded people who have also signed up for that tour themselves and have the same sort of outlet of aspirations as you do. There are other companies as well. There's Andante, and Nick will probably, as our culture editor, have far more options than I do. But I do think an escorted tour in general is a fantastic, outlet. It's the sort of thing that we will be writing an enormous amount about over the coming months, just to allow people who have spent the last year in real isolation to start making those connections again. Travel is a fantastic way of making friends and learning and coming back a different, changed in your own way. And I think, what's being asked for in that question feels exactly like the sort of thing we get the most of travel for. The school tour is a huge thing, as Claire said, for us, and I think it sounds like a brilliant idea. But Martin Randall would be my first option. I'm sure Nick's fine.
Yeah, I think these companies don't bill themselves as offering holidays for solo travelers, but very high proportions of people who attend are solos. Up to 50% in a typical group of, say, 20 or 30 individuals. And the same is true, and I would add to Ben's list, there's a company called ACE or ACE Travel. They've got a very wide range of cultural tours in this country and in Europe of various lengths, from a couple of nights to a week or 10 days. And some of the more adventurous tour operators like Explore and Exodus, they have a cultural side to their programs often, as well as an active side, and they tend to their clients tend to be from a slightly younger age group, but again, a high proportion of solos go on those trips. And then if you want a bigger choice of a bigger company, a bigger group of people, then some of the coach tours like Trafalgar, for example, have got some very interesting cultural programs. So there's a lot of choice out there, but don't feel you just have to be drawn to companies which are billed as singles or solos operators. Most escorted tours cater very, very well for that category of people.
And it's quite.
And what about insurance? There's a sorry, Ben, talk over you then. But there's David Withers has asked about travel insurance. Obviously, I bet you get asked about travel insurance more than anything, don't you, Nick? But particularly people who, even well-travelled people, travelling after COVID, post-lockdown, are going to be more nervous, and it makes, I guess, travel insurance policies even more confusing. So what advice can we give to people?
I think, if you people, I've had a few quite cross emails from readers who say, why can't I get insurance for cancellation? Because of the cancellation is the thing that people are most, as well as medical treatment, cancellation is what people are most worried about. But if you think about, if you were a travel insurer at the moment, would you want to take the risk of having to pay for people's cancelled holidays because of a new lockdown, or they had to self-isolate? It would be an incredibly expensive risk to take, and insurance premiums would have to soar in order to cover that. So if you look at it that way around, I think you can understand why insurers are so wary of it. That said, I don't think it's really a problem getting cover for if you fell ill while you were traveling abroad. So if you actually contracted COVID and needed treatment, that's easier to get. But you really need to sort of self-insure over the risk of cancellation. And that's why companies like we were saying, like British Airways Holidays, Abercrombie and Kent, virtually, TUI, all these companies have got very, very good. In fact, I think TUI offer free insurance at the moment. They offer very, very good flexible booking policies, which means that you don't have to worry quite so much about the risks of cancellation. And of course, now we have a replacement for the e-hit card, the G-hit card, which means you continue to get free treatment under the public health systems of EU countries. That really helps as well. It means that you worry much less about the potential costs of health treatment in Europe, at least.
And yeah, so as you said, some of the best insurance is making sure you're traveling with reputable tour operator.
Yeah.
So America. Ben and I were talking about America earlier today, and somebody's asked, when can I go and what are the restrictions on arrival in New York City and back in the UK on return? Well, at the moment, that you'd be lucky to get there, definitely very lucky to get back again. And you might find yourself at the in an airport hotel for quite a while when you returned. But what do we think what's the prognosis for a trip to North America?
It's been extraordinary, hasn't it? The idea that we've not had easy access across the Atlantic for the past year, and it would have been absolutely unthinkable a year ago. And here we are, just almost used to the idea that we can't visit New York or LA or all the other extraordinary destinations that, from a city perspective, that the US offers. I mean, the big thing that the US is dealing with at the moment is an extraordinary high incidence of COVID, and I don't, even though they have a new leader of the Western world now, I don't think Biden is going to be in any particular rush to British tourists. So I don't think it's impossible. It's the thing we're asked about a huge amount, because the US has always been a sort of heartland Telegraph travel territory, and our readers love it and they want to get back. But I think we've got to understand that they've got a lot of vaccinations to get through, and they've got their own schedule in terms of opening things up. And if I was going to guess, I would have a go at August in New York, but don't hold me to that. Nick,
what?
So I was just answering someone's question.
I'm going to hold you both to this.
I'm saying August in New York. It's too hot. It's a dreadful time to visit.
I was asking when British galleries were reopening and museums, so I was just answering that. I think, yeah, hopefully the summer. New York is quite well advanced on its vaccines, isn't it? But
I suppose there's the issue about whether it's going to be a national or regional unlockdown in America. We don't really do that yet, do we? It could be East Coast, it could be West Coast. It's all going to be very complicated.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's something to keep a watching brief on and not to book in advance, unless you're thinking of traveling in September or October. Just let things settle for a few more weeks and then take your opportunity, I think.
Yeah. So Nick, you wanted museums and galleries. I'm giving you museums and galleries in the UK.
Right.
Are they expected to open from April?
No, May the 17th. In fact, they're very upset about it. I was talking to one or two earlier on today. That you're allowed to. I can't remember it's the same days that the same day that saunas and steam rooms are opening. So they've been put in the same category as that, and they're a little bit fed up that hairdressers will be able to reopen on the 12th of April, but you won't be able to walk around the huge galleries of the British Museum or whatever. So it does seem a little bit of a strange one, but that's the way things are at the moment. They're lobbying very hard to open earlier. So that does put a little bit of a kibosh if you want a cultural break in Edinburgh or York or something and you wanted to include some museum visits in it. But maybe it'll change, but it's a slightly odd one, that.
We've got these definite points where they're going to be talking about, the next phase in this, but it isn't inconceivable that they'll bring in extra elements that they perhaps haven't thought about yet and should have. And we'll work a little bit harder at making sure those things open up a little earlier.
Do you think it's appropriate for us to be going and spending money abroad when, all these domestic attractions and hotels and restaurants are crying out for customers? Somebody, Andrew Mellors, asked this. It's a good question.
Well, I think that it depends what your motives and reasons are. If you're worried about the national economy and people's jobs, I think there's far more threat to people's jobs in aviation and tourism generally. And actually, many UK businesses which depend on tourism will probably have a bumper summer this year. It's going to be trickier, I think, for museums and city centre hotels because they'd be used to having a lot of American and Far Eastern tourists and so forth. But I think you'll be supporting just as many British jobs by travelling abroad this year as you will by staying by the seaside. That's my personal view, but I'm not an economist, so.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, anybody that's trying to get anywhere for UK for May half term, including me, probably finding it quite difficult at the moment.
Well, because it's so heavily booked, you mean, or because, yeah.
Well, I mean, especially when people like Priti Patel are coming up saying, you know, now is not a time to be booking a holiday. I think people are still in the cycle of thinking UK first at the moment. So to the point of the person who intervened earlier about that, I mean, I think it's very likely, as Nick said, that Britain is going to be absolutely chocker in 2021. And you know, if there's an appropriate moment later in the year when some people are able to, or those who are vaccinated are able to go and see a city abroad and it's safe and there's a vaccine passport and you're helping Heathrow or you're helping Gatwick or you're helping Edinburgh Airport, I sort of see it as a good thing. I mean, tourism is the biggest employer in the world, you know, and it's currently not employing very many people. So it would be great if we could get that moving again from an economic point of view.
Yeah, but in terms of the UK being chocker, I mean, you know, back to city breaks, which is the theme of this evening. You know, we've had several conversations on the desk about how actually, although the UK is getting booked up, those city centres will be really lacking in their overseas visitors that they kind of rely on, and actually probably won't be as busy or as chocker as we might have come to know them over summer months. So, you know, that's still a
go to Edinburgh, my hometown, amazing place. Be quiet in the summer.
Wonderful. You get some amazing deals in city centre hotels, I think, this year.
And we have some beautiful city centre hotels. I mean, you know.
Well, there's been. We've watched the evolution of city centre hotels over the past 5-10 years, where they're trying to produce the sort of sense that when you go and stay in one of these places, that it's something special rather than a business hotel. You're going to spend a couple of days in it, but mostly you won't be in the room and you'll be going out. With the boutique hotel industry, I mean, sort of, you know, pioneered by the Hotel du Vin and things like that over the years, we've got much more idiosyncratic and interesting places where you can enjoy a wonderful time in a city, but you can also sort of feel as though there's something special happening when you're spending the night or having a meal in the hotel and things like that. So, you know, 10 years ago, it was harder to want to do, if you were a Brit, to do a city break. Now, there's so many reasons to do it and to have to enjoy a certain amount of luxury and joy when you're at it.
Patricia's asked about single supplements in the UK and why they're so large. Nick, this is definitely one of your favourite topics.
We campaign on this.
I mean, this is perennial. This has been going on for many, many years.
I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny.
The hotels and will always argue that one person takes up as much space as two people, so they need to charge the same price for the room. And if you think about places like America, all hotel rooms are sold on a per room basis, and you put as many people sometimes as you want into the room, and it's still the same price. And it's essentially because of that. And also, to be frank, hotels are not quite so keen on single people because they don't make so much money over the bar, you know, they don't make so much money in the restaurants. So it's a perennial problem, and I don't really know what the solution is. I do think that operators and hotels between them could do more. So if the hotel isn't full, I don't see how they can argue, therefore, that they're losing out. So in shoulder seasons, sometimes you'll find a few being more responsive. If they know they're not going to be full, they will reduce single supplements. But it is a perennial problem, and short of making hotel rooms which could be divided into two by some sort of magic partition or something. I'm not sure if we will ever quite solve it, but that's the rationale behind it.
I mean, there are some tour operators that don't offer singles. So Exodus, for example, will let you book without having a single supplement on your tour. And I mean, I know that we might immediately think about hotels, but there are lots of cruise companies that are working very hard, I think, to have single cabins and make sure that there is enough opportunity for people who are traveling alone to get access to the same sort of holiday as other people. So I mean, there are movements in bits of the industry. Certainly, it's always going to be a struggle, and you do see in UK hotel rates, it tends to be a PP per person.
And some, and of course, I think Exodus is one of them. Some operators will allow you to share a room. They will arrange to share a room if you don't.
Suitable candidate.
Yeah. So there are ways around it, but everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah, Alana has corrected me when I said about hotel quarantine from the US. Of course, it isn't on the red list; it's on the green list. It was mooted that it might be going on this week, but that came to nothing. So thank you, Alana, for that. Wendy's asked about, we're chopping around a little bit here, but can two households mix indoors for a self-catering holiday from the 12th of April, that is? Nick, do you want to take that? I don't know if Ben's there. I can't see.
Ben's here. Always.
It says, I've actually got a summary here. Hospitality to reopen for outdoors for two households. I don't think that's going to be possible until May.
No.
That the two households can mix indoors. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's correct. Yeah. Yes, it is May the 17th. Indoor mixing for two households or more. So unless those people are in your bubble, then I'm afraid you won't be able to do that just yet.
Yeah, I think they've been necessarily vague about that, haven't they? I mean, I don't think it was even spelt out for the 21st of June, as I recall.
This isn't a very, I mean, but judging on that, it's not a very City Breaks question, but we're going to be working very hard to talk about the great places that you can stay in larger groups for later in the year, because there's a sort of pent up demand for two households to get together. So look out in Telegraph Travel Online and in print for some great ideas about larger properties where you can commingle like the old days.
Back to Eurostar and flying, and there's actually a question directly comparing the two. So, and the question is, would travel in the immediate future be better, and by better I think they mean safer, by Eurostar or flying? But let's take that question in terms of safer, but then also in terms of value and availability.
Well, I'm not sure that any studies have been done on the relative safety of flying or traveling by train. I think it would depend on the type of train. It would depend on how long the journey was. It would depend on how crowded the train was. So, for example, if you wanted to go to Paris, it's just a 40-minute flight from a south of England airport. If the plane was half empty or even a third empty and you were just on it for 40 minutes, that might be much safer than a fully loaded Eurostar, which takes 2 3/4 hours and maybe got delayed for half an hour. I think it's very hard to make direct comparisons like that. I reckon that I reckon that probably we'll have to see what happens when it comes to fares, but Eurostar is going to want to be pretty competitive over the next few weeks, I think, to try and persuade people to start traveling again. And they've got a lot of seats to sell on their trains. So you might find some pretty good value on Eurostar, but whether or not it's more or less safer than flying, I don't think we know. I don't think anyone knows that, to be honest.
There's the environmental impact as well, of course. I mean, lots of people are making conscious decisions, for better or worse, to make sure that they're not increasing their carbon footprint as much as possible. And trains are a wonderful way of seeing Europe. I mean, if it was a great idea on our desk before lockdown. I remember that if you decided that you were going to travel for your holidays via train abroad, you should be given more time off by your employer because you were doing a good thing in order to do that. There's a lovely sort of sense that you of graciousness about taking a train anyway. It does take a lot more time to get from A to B but you do get to experience the landscape and to see what's going on and to talk to your fellow travellers and have a meal and a drink in relative civilization at the same time as not going on the planet.
That conversation, as I recall, was fine for everyone apart from me, who was then inundated with rail holiday requests.
I'm sure they'll be back, Claire. Not long now.
I'm sure they will. But I'll be in there first, though. Kim's asked about the interpretation of the rules for campsites, particularly over coming bank holidays. As I understand it, and Ben and Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, as long as all your facilities are self-contained, they're open. But if those with shared showers and facilities, not open. Is that right?
That's as I understand it. I think you have to have private washing and lavatory facilities in order to open. But I'm not the world's biggest fan of camping, so I don't visit that many campsites. But as I understand it, some of the glamping operations where you got quite a smart setup, they do have that sort of private facilities. So maybe they will, if you pay a little bit more and go for a slightly more glamorous option, then you will be able to go a bit sooner.
Yeah, companies like Canopy and Stars have often specialised on the idea of going away, but really going away and isolating yourself in a yurt or a log cabin somewhere. And I think that sort of thing is obviously going to be very much in vogue over the coming months.
Yeah. And then somebody's asked about this is I guess quite relates quite well to city breaks, because I always want to go to markets and bring home loads of food from my city breaks. So somebody's asked if there's any difference in the rules on importing food souvenirs from city breaks due to Brexit.
No live oysters.
Well,
No live oysters.
yeah, well, I know that lorry drivers were having their ham sandwiches confiscated by the Dutch authorities not so long ago, but I'm not sure what the situation is returning to the UK. But in theory, there may well be problems over meat in particular. I think lots of countries prohibit the import of meat.
No chorizo.
No.
Oh well, there's always Sainsbury's.
Well, yeah. On that note, sadly, we've come to the end already. We're going to have to conclude tonight's, I think we can call them festivities. We have date, we have travel,
Party.
We are celebrating.
Yeah.
So just like to thank you all. I really hope this has been useful. I think we've gone on a few tangents from city breaks, but hopefully in response to the questions you've asked. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching.